So here we go again. This time around, we're going to be discussing Inception as a movie that was has always been ever since it came out a bit divisive, at least between us, I think, or at least between us and the reception, the overall reception that it had from the general viewership. And I know it showed up on one of the recommendations, or at least requested movies that Matt got as ones that we should discuss. So I thought it would be a good one.
Is that what we did? I didn't even know that was the reason this was suggested.
Yeah, so I looked at Matt's list that he sent me that he got from, I think, from some
Yeah,
friends,
from the various
and I
people. Yeah.
saw it on there, and partially because we did Tenet and we brought up Inception, and partially because we're also discussing Arrival is not really that, it's not similar, but it connects in a way to Blade Runner too, like it's what
Okay.
2049, whatever the
Yeah, I got you.
um yeah, so I'll connect this all in a way, but maybe this is a good way to get into it. I don't know how much we can spend the first half of the talk about recommending this movie. I guess we could, but it's been out for a while and most people have seen it. So,
Yeah,
how do you guys feel
it's
as
been
far?
11 years, so
Yeah. So, how do you guys feel as far as seeing it again or more recently, as far as recommending it to say a new audience, somebody who's say young and hasn't seen it? And,
Well, I mean, wouldn't it be fair to say that at this point in time, if somebody hadn't seen a movie this big, it would have to be for a pretty substantial reason, right? I mean, they'd be like living under a rock, or they'd be something like that.
yeah, I mean, they could be just young. If you're like
Yeah, I
16,
guess so.
17, you might have not gotten around to seeing a slightly older movie,
I
but
guess so.
totally. I mean, if you know anything about Christopher Nolan, I'm sure you've gone back and seen The Dark Knight and Inception. Those two were pretty big, especially for people who were young at the time, and it was
Yeah.
very influential for them.
Would it be fair to say I'm trying to go back in my memory here from when we all saw this a decade ago? Is it fair to say that all three of us enjoyed this movie, but that when we saw it, that we were surprised that everybody more or less thought it was the greatest movie ever made?
yeah,
Yeah, and I think this is the this is where this discussion comes in because I think all of us, especially coming after the very strong impression that The Dark Knight left on us, there was just no way. There was no way that Nolan was gonna top The Dark Knight with his next movie. I mean, The Inception was ambitious. It was completely original. The trailer set it up to be
Oh
one of
yeah,
the best movies ever made. As far as even the logo for his company, the syncope thing, was made for Inception. Just the whole thing is like the logo is
yeah, it's
the
amazing.
maze thing. It's like he was born to make this movie. Only once I saw it, it was just, it wasn't the trailer, it wasn't what I expected, and it was definitely not as good as The Dark Knight. And that's what I've wondered all these years is what was it one of those movies that because of having such high expectations, that's why my response to it wasn't as strong. And also responding to the younger people back then saying straight up best movie ever made, which is ridiculous.
as a projectionist, I saw Inception probably 16 times just from the booth, not to mention in the IMAX theater. Watching it again, for all of its flaws, and we'll get into the flaws later, the thing that really strikes me is that it really is a movie that is kind of focused on being a movie. In that, I mean, just think about all of the great films that we've ever seen. I mean, think about just filmmaking as a craft.
Yeah,
You don't show the person walking to his or her car. You just show the person like leaving and then getting into the car. And Inception really based so much of its narrative on the cinematic process, which is just, yeah, you're in the middle of a situation and you don't know why you're there.
Yeah.
You don't know what predicated it. You don't know exactly the steps that you took to get where you are. Fundamentally, I think that the brilliance of Inception, for all of its flaws, is that cinema is kind of like a dream. You know, you're just kind of dropped into this and you accept it and you go with it and you live it. And it doesn't seem weird until you emerge from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and you mentioned that you agree there's some flaws there, and I was relating it in a way. I think it was around that time when wasn't it Spider-Man 3 came out not too long before or after
Probably before, but
Inception.
yeah.
Yeah, there was like a stream of these movies that had tremendous trailers, 2007, tremendous trailers that set them up, and then the movie didn't live up to what the trailer was. Like literally, the trailer had more substance than the movie had, which is definitely Spider-Man 3, and I felt in a way Inception, and there was also 2011 Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, also arguably the greatest trailer of all time. The movie
Top
itself,
30.
it's pretty good. Like, it's a good movie, but it's not the best like spy thriller ever. The trailer is tremendous. Like the use of the music from what
Yeah.
was the Danny Elfman music from the Wolfman something. It's just
Yeah,
just amazing.
it was from the Wolfman. And by the way, Inception came out 4 years after Spider-Man 3.
Yes, so I said 2007 Spider-Man 3,
Yeah,
2011, but for some reason, I guess at that time we were
Yeah,
kind of
that
like
4 or 5 year period is what you're thinking. Yeah.
those 4 or 5 years were kind of like a haze because it was like our formative years, like mid to late 20s, just depending on which of us. So yeah, it's all a blur. But I just felt like at that time there was like this stream of a few movies where the trailers were better than the movies.
Girl with the
But
Dragon Tattoo remake.
yeah, potentially. I think that was a bit later, right?
Oh, it's 2011. Same as Tinker Tailor.
Oh, really? Yeah, but that shows as much how much of that period was a blur because I honestly thought that Girl with a Dragon Tattoo was like 2015. So that's how yeah. So that's funny. But yeah, but that's again a bit off topic. So yes, there was that disappointment that I had with Inception because I felt like it didn't really have that much substance. It was mostly, it felt like one of that quintessential visual masturbation movie, like a movie that was basically designed, sort of like what Matt said about so focused on being a film. Everything there was geared towards how we can give a premise that we can play with everything, with gravity, with architecture, with action, with like absolute time, like everything. It was like the
Physics.
perfect, yeah, conceit, but then I felt like it was empty. It was hollow. It was really all about a tragedy and a love story combined with a heist that's for a silly reason for a heist. I mean, high stakes as far as international intrigue, but not in a similar way to Tenet, where I felt like the whole time continuum was, the stakes. That's why what I like about Tenet a bit more is that at least he went for something for higher stakes. Um,
Well, Gil, we definitely probably are all on a similar page with that when it comes to the like when it came out. Do you still feel that way now after having just recently seen it?
No, so that's the thing, and that's why I'm glad I revisited it. I forgive it. I think that the second time around, I got the love story more. I focused less about the heist, and even the heist part, the relationship, the father-son relationship. It's a bit cliche. The love story was cliche. These are still flaws in the movie, I think, and you can tell me if those are similar flaws you're seeing or other ones. But they are fairly simple. There's nothing special about them, and they're pretty cliche. They're done to good effect, but there wasn't anything revolutionary about them. What I like about good science fiction is that the emotions that you get to explore are impossible to replicate in the real world. And that to some degree happens here because, and I guess we can get to that in the second half in case we want to avoid spoilers. And we can get into maybe relating it to other movies. So those are my thoughts generally. But I will say, and we'll get to the ratings as well. I will say I think I liked it better, but surprisingly, once I saw my rating from back then, because back then I did rate movies, I was in the same place. It was like, oh, I actually rated it pretty high. So I guess I was maybe on the one end of the spectrum, and this one, or on the low end, and this time I'll be on the high end. But really, I kind of gave it a fair, even though I criticized it a lot. I guess I was kind of a dumbass about it, and just mostly reacting to the explosiveness of the response from everybody else, and not so much that I disliked the movie.
I think that they're fundamentally, upon rewatching the other night, I mean, there is an emotional resonance that still kind of hits me every time I watch the movie. I think that there are serious problems with the convolution of the science fiction element of the movie. And I think that there are serious issues with, even with the emotional resonance of the movie that are linked to, inextricably linked to the science fiction aspects of the story.
Like what?
Yeah, well, you can't get past Cobb not being able to do his job, which is remarkably unethical to begin with. We can deal with that later. And putting his team into peril and so on and so forth as a result of his connection with Maul. I mean, you can understand it, but I don't think that you really need. I don't think that you need a science. The science fiction framework doesn't justify what anybody is doing.
You mean like with the way that they're like profiting off of like extracting things from people's brains?
Yeah, that and breaking down multinational corporations just for the sake of bolstering another multinational corporation and so
Well,
on.
if you believe Saito's one line in the movie, he's supposedly the good guy because he says that his company is the one thing standing in the way from that company becoming like the having a stranglehold on all of the world's energy or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, anybody who lives in the real world knows that that's not a real thing that happens.
Well, in a sense, isn't what you just said right now what's wrong with a lot of aspects of the movie is that like in order for us to completely gel with what's happening, we have to just sort of accept these like one line, explanations for things.
Yeah, I guess so, but I mean, it still just kind of boils down to, oh, you're doing something wrong. I mean, if people are supporting one side and not the other, and you're going to literally infiltrate somebody else's mind to gain power in the market. That's kind of shitty, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, they're also doing it for money.
Well, I mean, power and money are kind of, I think, married in this
Yeah. I mean,
conversation.
I didn't say that to mean that was an excuse. I just throwing it out there that, like,
Right.
everybody but
Yeah.
Cobb is doing it for a paycheck, and he's doing it to get back to his children.
Yeah.
I guess in a way like Wrath of Man, that technically they're all baddies. Like they don't have too many redeeming qualities. Cobb's got his kids that he wants to return to, and the love story, but really there's not a lot of maybe the kid of the father of the corporation technically is maybe slightly sympathetic, but he's also
Yeah, I mean, none of them are
That's right.
that horrible. They're just they're like thieves. They're like performing a heist, more or less.
yes, which was my biggest criticism, and it might be a good place unless you guys have any other comments about as far as recommendation is that if you go into this movie thinking that, because one of the greatest lines, and he mentions it in the movie that's in the trailer, as he says the most like dangerous, not dangerous, but the most like the strongest, like most surviving thing in the world is an idea. Like once you get an idea,
Yeah.
you can't really destroy it. I forget the actual quote. That's a really good line, and it's the perfect line to put in the trailer.
Yeah,
And I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be something about they're gonna go into a dream and something with like Jesus, or like think about what's the greatest idea ever created by humanities. Jesus, God, like those kind of ideas that completely transformed the culture for thousands of years. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is gonna be something nuts. Like they're gonna plant some seed that's gonna create some like alternative reality, and it's gonna be amazing. And then it's a heist movie. It's like The Dark Knight. He took that and he did make it a heist movie slash crime drama instead of a comic book movie. But he has the philosophizing, or at least the philosophies of each character, the chaos versus order. There's a lot going on there. He's trying to deal with real subjects in the real world. And I felt like with Inception, it's a love story and a father-son relationship under the guise of a heist movie. And yeah, I mean, that's okay. That's just,
I mean, essentially what you're saying is that you felt that you took what The Dark Knight could have been and really elevated it. And then with this movie, you had certain expectations based on the trailer, and then it was like, that was good, but not as far as it could have been pushed.
yeah, exactly. And that connects a little bit to my I don't know, my criticism of, like, let's say Blade Runner and other movies, and then maybe we'll get into more detail when we do those episodes. But there's these movies, I would say, in generally most Ridley Scott movies, I feel this way, is like Blade Runner. And although Denis Villeneuve also repeated that mistake, or maybe he intentionally did this with the 2049, because he knew that's what the original was like, so he basically copied that concept. The Gladiator 2, there's these movies that seem like they have substance. They try to have substance. There's lines in there that hit at substance, but they're kind of soulless. They don't actually deal with this with the issues head on. Like Blade Runner is not really about what it means to be human and the android versus. Sorry.
You don't think that that you're talking about the original one, not the sequel?
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think that the episode when Data is on trial on Star Trek is a much better dramatic exploration of what it means to be human versus an android, even though it's just
I think that Terminator 2 is a better exploration of that as well, but it doesn't change the fact that that's more or less what Blade Runner's about.
Yes, but is it really, like, is that what the movie's about? The movie is a detective story, really, and there's that scene in the end with the rain and the this and the that. But how crucial is the character, like of the I forgot the actor's name, the blonde guy.
Rutger Hauer.
Rutger Hauer.
Yeah, I honestly, every time I see that movie, I'm so bored by it that by the time I get to the end of it, if there was anything that was built up to, I've missed it. It just feels like it's not built that way. For me, like movies like Ex Machina or like Moon, those are movies that they take a subject and they just go all in. They really just get to the bottom of it, and they're like, and through those stories, these science fiction stories, and this brings us back to Inception, they're able to, much like good Star Trek episodes, good science fiction, Twilight Zone episodes too, they get to this truth of what it means to be human, even though sometimes the character themselves are not necessarily human, or at least they're human to some degree. Sometimes they're robots, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're whatever they are.
Williams.
Yeah, and sometimes exactly, and sometimes there's humans involved in the plot, or maybe they're even the lead characters. But they reveal something that's not just straight up drama. That you could not conjure this if these were normal, realistic circumstances. And I felt like in Blade Runner, it didn't do that. It just didn't do that. It was Blade Runner and other movies of that sort to me are a good action style Star Trek episode versus the philosophy oriented Star Trek episode. That's what I feel like, that they deal more with the spectacle, less with the substance part. And I think Inception is more in the spectacle than the substance. I think The Dark Knight has found that perfect balance. It's split right in the middle. And then other movies like Moon, Ex Machina, there's a few other ones we can mention, are just all in. Like they really just delve deep into the subjects that they're exploring. And I love those movies, but I totally understand why these bigger movies with more action have a wider appeal.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I would also say that I'm perfectly happy to have Blade Runner over Black Woman Space Jesus that they're giving us with Star Trek Discovery and everything. But you know, like I mean, yeah, there is a line to be towed in terms of spectacle versus messages. And when it comes to Inception, when it comes to spectacle, it knocked the ball out of the fucking park.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
When it comes to messages, yeah, there's a debate to be had about its efficacy, about its originality, about its boldness. But you know, the bottom line is when people watch the movie, nobody freaking cares about the message. It's just it just looks great. It's just an experience. You know, it looks, it sounds, and
Feels.
you know, like it engulfs you. And especially if you saw it in IMAX, like I did, that's a real thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what I will say, and I guess this would end where I would place my recommendation, and this would be a warm recommendation. I understand what the young people back then felt. This was, when I was growing up, this was my Independence Day. Like when I watched Independence Day, I knew it was like a silly popcorn movie, but it was the closest thing to Star Wars that I've seen in a movie theater, because I didn't see Star Wars up until that point. I only saw it on TV. This, like, I went to the movies and it was like a big, bold, action-oriented humor, adventure, crazy good characters. I was obviously also young, too young to know that it's also not a great movie, not nearly as good as Star Wars, and maybe not as good as Inception. But at the time, it was one of those movies. I do not rewatch movies in theaters, but that was one of those movies where I went 2-3 times when I was a kid. I dragged my mom, which is embarrassing now to look back at it. It's like that movie. I was so in love with that movie. I thought it was like the world. At the time, I totally thought it was like a top 5 movie of all time.
Gil, don't
Nowadays,
feel bad about that. Matt took his mom to go see Mother.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I definitely don't feel bad. I'm sure Matt has done worse things. At least I didn't. The other movie when I was growing up. Yeah, go ahead.
I took my mom to see Monsters Ball.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Oh boy.
that might be a whole nother level.
Yeah, that's a different level. My mom doesn't really go to see movies, so it was kind of silly. I took her. Luckily, the other movie that I saw more than once in theaters growing up was Dumb and Dumber, and at least I didn't drag her to that one.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, both are great movies. Dumb and Dumber is one of the best comedies of all time, and I do still believe that Independence Day is like a top 10 action movie of all time.
Certainly Roland Emmerich's best film for sure.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, yeah, well, Stargate is pretty good, but yeah, I think it is better. Independence Day is pretty good.
Yeah,
Um,
Patriot's pretty good too.
Patriot's pretty good, but it's like in a different way.
Yeah,
In any case, but yeah, no, it was totally like a new Star Wars. I felt like for my generation,
yeah,
and the thing with Inception is we already had it. It was The Dark Knight. It came out a couple of years before, or two. Yeah, like it was overshadowed by The Dark Knight because The Dark Knight is a better movie, and that was a movie of a generation, and it's even ranked
yeah.
higher on IMDb. But the fact that Inception is 13 on the top 250 list is preposterous. At least The Dark Knight is 4, so it's higher. But I really think Inception being on 13, like maybe top 50, I'll give it that for
Oh,
the
I would
young.
give it that. Yeah, I'd say top 50.
But like 13, come on. But in any case,
I
so
did
yeah,
not know
that's
until you said that right now. I didn't know it was that high. That is very interesting. It's not surprising considering the crazy like hordes of fans that love this movie and feel like it's like Nolan's best film. But wow, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So I totally get that for some reason, maybe because Dark Knight was a sequel, and for whatever reason, people clung. Maybe Inception was an original movie, not a comic book movie, and maybe that's why people clung to it. They made it their own by choosing it to be this flag bearer. For this generation of action movies, like their T2, their Terminator 2, their Star
Yeah,
Wars, their Independence
sure.
Day, whatever movie you wanna. Yeah, so I totally understand that.
I was gonna just say that yeah, I definitely get why it was so popular. I don't think it's 13th best or anything like that, but the I don't know. I just comparing to a couple of things we've talked about really recently. I think that this movie, Inception, shows how that technology affected the world a little bit better than some of the other, movies like it. Like obviously we recently talked about Tenet, and that was the one where I was like, like you really don't see that technology changing things that much, and you feel like it would have a huge change on the world. Whereas this one, you see like those scenes where they're where were they, Morocco or something like, I can't remember where he picked up the first guy that's helping him out, but
Yeeves,
what?
sorry, Yeeves played by Tom Hardy.
But by the way, Matt, if you need to if you need to clear your throat, if you need to
Sorry.
clear your throat, there's a mute button. You can always take a pause and give it a good clearing. I,
Anyway, all I was trying to say is that I felt like the when you this time through I was watching, and it really struck me that it's like what you're seeing feels like a world where this dream technology's been around for a while, and it's kind of cool. There's like a whole industry about it. The people who can afford it can afford to pay experts to teach them how to defend themselves against it. And there's bars where people illegally go to dream with this crazy stuff, and there's like a guy who's like a freaking chemist who can like specially make knockout cocktails to help you do this and have a better experience. And it's just, I don't know, I just thought there was a lot of thought put into it. I really liked that aspect of it, and that kind of stuck out to me. And I just also wanted to just throw out there that like the Joseph Gordon-Levitt hallway fight scene is the best fight scene that Christopher Nolan has ever filmed. Yeah, and I don't know. I think Tom Hardy and Joseph Gordon-Levitt kind of steal the show.
Yeah, usually most people steal DiCaprio's thunder. Although he had his moments, I guess in Django he was pretty good, but generally I'm not
That's when I
not a
thought he
huge fan.
started. He started like really holding his own. Was that and the movies that followed? But before that, I was kind of like you said. I guess that's the best way to put it. That people can kind of steal his thunder a bit in these earlier in these films that were at this time period.
Yeah, and in general, Tarantino gets the best of him. I feel like also Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he's
Oh
got
man,
good
yeah,
films
both of
there.
those movies, he's like on fire.
Yeah, no, he definitely commits. Like it's good that he's committing like later in his career, so he's not like
Yeah.
resting on his laurels. Um,
I wanted to throw this out there too because I just thought it was interesting. Like, so this is when was this movie again? 2009 or something like that?
I think it's
2010,
2010.
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2010. I mean, I'd have to look it up really to like see for sure, but it just when I saw this tonight, one thing that kind of stuck out to me, and it made me think about one of Nolan's other films, Batman Begins, was just that like he's got this outstanding role, small supporting role for Tom Berenger in this
Yeah,
movie, you know? And I was thinking about it and I was like, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'd have to like look at his IMDb page. I'm kind of like glancing at it real quickly here, but I mean, had Tom Berenger done anything of note, like at all, for a decade or two before this? I mean, I'm not seeing much when I'm glancing at it. I'm seeing a bunch of sequels to the movie Sniper. I mean, this is like, oh, this has got to be like, you know, really out of nowhere, like a big bone for his career, you know? And I thought about it and I was like, you know, it's really kind of similar to how out of nowhere he cast a very similar role too. He cast Rutger Hauer in Batman Begins, and then that kind of like gave a little jolt to his career too.
Yeah, also Eric Roberts and Dark Knight. I
yeah.
felt like
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I didn't think about Eric Roberts. Yeah.
yeah, he's got a thing about like plucking like actors from, and Tarantino does the same thing.
I feel like
Um,
Tarantino manages to revive careers entirely though.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know for sure. Definitely, there's definitely that. Yeah, so I don't know. Do you guys want to talk about the ratings?
Sure.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
Matt.
Uh,
Do you
uh,
know that he wants to go first?
No.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll say 7.5.
Wow, that's pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty. Yeah. Okay, Jason.
I think it's a solid 8. This time through. If you'd asked me before, I would have said like 7. But I definitely gained a little bit of appreciation for it this time through.
Yeah, so it's funny because I really thought I gave it a 7 like back then, and then I look back and I give it an 8. And
Nice.
I think that back then I barely give it an 8. I gave it an 8 just as respect for the originality and everything, but it's basically an insult to that movie because it totally should have been a 9 or a 10, but given it an 8 maybe back then I felt was a punishment. um, I don't know.
Or maybe you're just
Uh,
like low level precognitive. Maybe I don't know.
yeah, so I feel like it was like a tempered 8, and now it's definitely a solid 8. Like maybe it was 8.1, and now I'm more like 8.5. I've definitely gained a few points for it, but it's better than average to me. Like 7 is often I put as average, so it is a slightly better than average action movie. So 7.5 too, I feel like is fair. Anything like below, if you want to rank it below 8, that's definitely the way to go. Is 7. So yeah, I think 7 to 8 is definitely where it would fall. Yeah. Should
Yeah.
we move on to the second half?
Yes.
Cool.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, how do you guys feel? We touched a little bit about the whole substance versus spectacle. How did you feel about the relationship with the wife and the thing with the kids, and also the infamous ending being mysterious. And what was your reaction to it this time around, or at least maybe comparing it to how you reacted to it the first time?
You're asking how I felt about it, like in general.
Yeah, I mean, did it come off as the relationship between them? Essentially, what
Oh,
happened?
I see.
Yeah, did it
Work.
feel cliche, or did it work? And how did you feel about the ending? Like the the ending as far as the spinning thing,
Uh,
um, totem thing,
that
all
that's
that.
almost a separate thing for me, but I don't know. So the whole aspect of what you're talking about, like, did it work? Especially their relationship, the kids being that whole like plot device and everything. For me personally, that's one of the more frustrating parts about the movie because that's linked to one of my biggest problems with the film.
Also,
I think that even though this movie is totally packed filled with excellent actors doing wonderful performances, I think it's completely unnecessarily complicated to cast Leonardo DiCaprio, Michael Caine, and Marion Cotillard in the relationship family dynamic that they are supposed to represent in this movie.
yeah, I agree. Definitely, there was like a phase there of a few years that everybody was casting Cotillard, and I felt like, why? I mean, she's good looking, and
She's an
you
amazing
know,
actress, but I
and
mean,
she's a decent actress, but she's not. I don't think it warrants the accent becoming a thing, especially if you're gonna have Michael Caine as a
well, that's what I'm
grandfather of
saying. I
sorts.
feel like you can cast. All right, so clearly they, for the sake of the plot, they want Cobb to be American because the whole thing is he's living life in other countries and he's trying to come back to America, right? So that's just makes perfect sense that he's American, right? And really, it's like it's like cast Michael Caine or cast Marion Cotillard. Don't cast both of them because really we have to assume at this point, watching the movie, that I guess Michael Caine is British and probably moved to France and got married and had Mal, Marion Cotillard's character, and then she must have grown up in France her entire life because she clearly has when she speaks English, she clearly has a very French accent. And then you pretty much can assume that she met Leonardo DiCaprio because he was one of her father's students or something, of that architecture students at this French architectural school.
Yeah.
And then I guess when they got married, he took her back to America, and then they had kids. And now, after their time together, the 50 years they spend in the dream state, and she commits suicide, and I guess he leaves the kids with his mom, I guess, because the kids say grandma on the phone, so it's got to be his mom, the American mom. And so I guess Michael Caine is taking trips to America to bring the toys that they talk about so that he can visit his grandchildren, and then flying back to France. And it's like, it's not impossible. None of it's impossible, but it's like, why make all those extra steps? Why not just cast somebody with a French accent rather than Michael Caine, if that's what you want the story to be? Or cast somebody with a British accent instead of Marion Cotillard, because it's like, why is there this? It's unless it's part of the plot of the movie, which it is not in this case. Like, why are you adding all these extra steps just to cast a certain person?
Yeah, it's a bit of a distraction for sure.
That's how I felt.
Um,
So you asked about, do I feel? Sorry to go full circle here. You asked about how I feel about it. I think it works in general. I just get distracted when I'm watching it because I'm like, gosh, even the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Kickboxer took 3 seconds for them to like put lazy exposition in and go, it's a good thing our parents met across the seas and then we can still be brothers even though I have a crazy accent and you don't. I don't know what accent I was just doing right there. I'm just but you know what I'm saying? Like, if Kickboxer could do it, then you know what I'm saying? It's just ridiculous that they're expecting us to believe that Michael Caine is her father.
Van Damme, Schwarzenegger. It's funny. I feel like Stallone also needed one of those like one-liner explanation. Oh, the reason why I have this, like.
It would have been probably better if they had to do his movies.
Yeah, because he just barely can talk.
Yeah.
Jason touched on a lot that I never even thought about. But the top at the end of the movie is always something that is going to bother me.
Why?
Because it is clearly meant at the end of the movie to be kind of ambiguous. The top does wobble.
Of course.
And it shouldn't have.
Why not?
That's the moment that the movie is actually making its statement. Either you're going full bore and saying, look, this is our $200 million version of Memento. And yes, Cobb has decided that he would rather live in his dream than live in real life. Or you're saying everything worked out. And Cobb was able to go back home and his kids were there and everything is hunky-dory.
Why do you see that as a problem?
I see that as a problem because it doesn't make a statement.
I think it does.
What statement does it make?
I think that it doesn't matter. I think that he did that intentionally and didn't show the thing drop. Number one, because he wanted to fuck with people. But more importantly than that, the whole movie since the beginning, like after we're back in the real world and everything, all those scenes where the Ellen Page character is getting to know Cobb a little bit better, and she starts getting worried about him and stuff. In all those scenes, he's constantly spinning the top, and when he tests out the drugs to go into the dream state earlier before that, he gets out and it's a crazy rush, and he runs to the bathroom and he's like splashing water in his face, spins the top, all those things. He's constantly doing that because after all that time he spent with Marion Cotillard, he's kind of obsessed with making sure that he's in the real world. And there's a whole monologue thing that she has towards the end that is, in my opinion, a little out of place. But anyway, that's beside the point. Where she's telling him, come join me, and he's saying no, and there's this whole thing about her saying don't get lost in there, and so on and so forth, and he's not letting her go, according to Ellen Page's line. She's saying, like, you can't keep this person trapped in there, you're like not letting her go, basically, and all this stuff like that. It doesn't matter at the end if the plan succeeded and everything went well, or if he is just embracing the dream or whatever. The point is that finally, by the end of the movie, he's made a choice. It doesn't matter if the top falls over or not, because he has walked away from the top and he's gone to go look at his children for the first time.
Well, one thing I was gonna say, because I haven't read many articles about the theories and what people think online. So honestly, this is mostly my opinion. I did hear here and there that the main theory is that the point of the movie, that because we don't know whether it drops or not and it wobbles, so it leaves it in question, is that it doesn't matter whether it's a dream or not. He got what he wanted. He got to his kids. I agree with Matt that that doesn't fly, and I can tell you why. At least this would be my theory in an article I would write about. It's actually not that complicated. There's a few reasons why I believe he's in the real world, or at least the movie would be shit if he wasn't in the dream world. For one thing,
thank you.
Yeah, exactly. For one thing, it does wobble. I'm sure wobbling can happen, but the whole setup of the movie, the whole substance, if you will, or like what it builds up to, is that this guy lives in the dream world, and he lived in the dream world for many, many years, for 50 years with the, with his wife and all that, and that's how that whole happened. And the whole time, he's trying to convince her to get back to the real world. And eventually had to trick her and create Inception on her to like get her out.
Yeah.
And the whole movie, every time his kids show up in the dream world, this is the second hint, you never see their faces. He only sees their faces in the end. You could make an argument that, like, well, maybe in this version of the dream where he's accepted that it's okay for him to continue dreaming, then he finally sees them. So it's still possible for him to be in the dream world. The way I interpret the ending, it's not consistent with his character to just accept the dream world. It's either consistent for him to spin the top and wait for it to drop to know that he's in the real world, or the fact that he leaves the top and not even see if it drops is that he no longer needs it to know, because now he's seen their faces. That's all the proof that he needs to know that he's in the real world. That's what I think it is.
I like that too. That's good.
Yeah,
There is one, just to pile on top of that. I'm not going to claim that I spotted this or anything. I was just reading it somewhere. But they also say, to back up that theory, that throughout the movie, the only scenes you see him wearing a wedding ring is when he's in a dream world, and they intentionally obscure his hand in a bunch of them just to make it unclear. But at the very end, when he's going through the TSA thing or whatever, that you do see his hand and he's not wearing the ring. So it does imply that it seems like it's the real world, at least.
also, I mean, there is that issue of like, Michael Caine was literally waiting there with a sign to pick up Cobb after the whole ordeal. That doesn't really seem to gel with reality. I mean, if Cobb is literally getting on the plane with a 50-50 chance of, well, either I'm going to be exonerated of my crimes or I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that his father-in-law is going to be standing there waiting for him.
Well, I don't know. I would feel like I totally agree with you with that statement. I think there's other things too that pile onto that, like the fact, like just how easy it was for him to get through. It's like, even if this guy had a lot of pull and could make a phone call and then things could be good, you almost feel like he'd be stopped at the gate, and then there'd be some phone calls and things, and then they'd let him through or something like that. But yet it works out so nicely, and there's kind of the moment where he's kind of looking at all his teammates as he's walking through baggage.
Yeah, but
it feels so perfect. So it does lend that concept of maybe it was fake, but I do think it was probably meant to believe that it was real.
Yeah, but still, my criticism that's stood for 10 years now, and I don't think it's wavered, and by all means, attack me if I'm wrong. Okay, we can interpret the top wobbling in two ways. Either he's in the real world or he's in the dream world, right?
I imagine those are the only choices.
Yeah. If he's in the dream world, then it's basically Memento. Screw it. I'm happy where I am. My reality has become something different from what actual reality is, but it's my reality and it makes me happy, and I can live the rest of my life that way.
I mean,
why not do it?
Isn't that a little bit cynical, though? I mean,
I'm not saying that I'm not being cynical. I'm just saying that.
No. Let me rephrase it. Isn't that a cynical way of looking at that option? I mean, it doesn't have to just be that that he's just accepting this, thing, and it makes him sound kind of selfish. He, in the moment where, assuming that was what it is, I'm not saying it is, but if it was a dream, and the moment he made that choice, he was doing it to complete the mission and save all those other people, because they had to apparently go in there and get Fisher from Mao. So it was almost like a noble sacrifice.
I mean, that's fair.
Memento. I mean, similar, sure, certainly similar, but it's not just like the way it is in Memento, where he's
it's not entirely like Memento, but there are echoes of
certainly.
Memento.
It goes back to the whole, a lot of these movies is the allegory of the cave thing, the Star Trek thing, and Plato.
Yeah.
It's about, like, if your whole life, Dark City we touched on, if your whole life was an illusion, is it still worth living? The answer is probably yes, because what other option do you have? Or at least if you don't have the other option. But in the cave, if you can get out of the cave and see the real world, that's where you should be. So that's why you should never be content. But if it is your only option, who's to say that it's not a reality? Or
just
worth
side note, throwing it out there, everything you just said,
yeah,
totally go see the movie Free Guy.
Cool. But so, if I may finish my point,
yeah, go.
Yes. The opposite is that he is in the real world at the end of Inception. He really did get to go home to his children, and everything did work out. I would challenge anybody to tell me what the movie is saying, if that's the case.
Wait, so yeah, sorry. So maybe I'm confused now. So are you saying that if he did get back to the real world, that the movie doesn't work?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny, because I think the complete opposite.
Okay.
No, that's what I said. That's why I said, like, that's why it doesn't make sense for him to be in the dream world, because it's not consistent. It's fine that we agreed so vehemently before, but not like it's not consistent with his character and with the whole way the movie is set up for him to end in a dream world. He spent years and years trying to convince his wife that the dream world was not real. So how can someone who spent that long and ended up killing his wife in the process, or making her kill herself, can go back to or commit to that dream world? It's inconsistent with his character and the fact that he never saw his kids' faces in the dream world. He only sees their backs because he psychologically decided that he can never see their faces in the dream world because of his goal of seeing them in person. That once he sees them in person and once he saw their faces, the top no longer matters. All that matters is the kids. They're all the hint that he needs to know that he's in the real world. That's the way I see it, and it's consistent with the movie, and it's the correct ending. The fact that
Certainly a much happier ending.
And it's a happier ending. And the fact that Nolan wants to be ambiguous, to be an asshole, that's okay. Or to do a shtick, it's okay. But technically, that is the most consistent ending. If he ends up choosing that, then yes, in this movie, it's extremely cynical, but acceptable. It's acceptable if that is the only option. Like if he is stuck, although all the hints show, like, based on he finds Saito and he's like gonna kill him or something so he can wake up. All the hints show that he does get out. It's just that they make it ambiguous. He wakes up all of a sudden. He gets through like customs very easily. The grandfather is there. Like all those things seem a bit too convenient as a misdirection. Like it's a Nolan's misdirection. But then once he sees the kids' faces, the thing wobbles. He doesn't see it actually fall because the faces is really all he needs to know he's in the real world. That's my interpretation. But I totally accept the other one. I just think that it makes it a lesser movie because it's completely inconsistent with his character. But maybe that could be a point as well, that eventually in life, if it just sucks and you can't get what you want, then you just flip and do the complete opposite, and you end up stuck in the dream world forever, just like the wife wanted to be, even though it wasn't real. And he tried to convince her for 50 years that it wasn't real and that the kids there are not real and that the real kids are outside. So he spent all this time just to end up in the same place without her? That makes no sense.
I agree that it makes no sense, but I do think that that's what the movie was doing. I can't get away from it. I mean, I've seen the movie more than a dozen times at this point. All of the context clues point to he's still in a dream.
So how do you explain the fact that he never sees their faces, but he does see them in the end?
Because he's come to the point where he's just accepted that the dream is better than reality.
I'm not
Because he can't
necessarily
get out.
agreeing with Matt, but I just to throw this out there, in the scene towards the very end, when he sits down across the table from Marion Cotillard, there's a scene where there's a moment, I should say, where she calls out their names, and he like instinctively takes his hand and shields the side of his face in the chance that they might come around the corner or something. So even though I agree that as a movie, the filmmaker tells you certain things, and so like we should feel that when he sees their faces at the end, that definitely means he's in the real world. You could at least make the argument that he always could have seen their faces had he chosen to do so, and that he is in the dream. I don't know. It's just something that I thought about.
It's a good point. It's a valid point, and honestly, maybe that's the idea of the top wobbling and everything, is that technically it could go both ways. That you can essentially interpret, if you're cynical, you can like in the memento way, like it's funny because I like bad endings, but I feel like specifically it's so inconsistent with the character that it just doesn't make sense as a course of action for him to just accept it.
I'm not denying that I'm cynical, but I just fail to see what the movie is actually saying. If the reality is that, oh, well, it all turned out topsy-turvy and, Saito picked up the phone and Cobb got to go home and hug his kids. I mean, what the hell is the movie saying?
No, I think what the movie is saying, and I want to have like a side note before I forget to bring it up. It's kind of weird that he can't see his kids. Why can't they fly to Europe to see him? That's one thing I would say. What?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, I'll say that's one thing that's bothered me while I was watching the movie. First of all, there's Skype. It's 2010. You can see them over like video call. And secondly, oftentimes what happens is, you just get them to Europe somehow. I mean, if they're with the grandmother, if they're not like taken by the authorities, and they did not mention that, then there should be a way to fly them to Europe to reunite with them.
One of many small problems with this movie.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like one major issue with the movie for sure. But that aside, to me, what it would, if you interpret the movie that he's in the real world, is that, and like Jason said, whether it's like intentionally or not, or consciously or not, in the dream world, there's two things that were hints for him that he's in the dream world: the top and his kids, because he essentially always forced himself to make sure to never see his kids. So because he spent all that time with his wife and they had the whole thing with the kids, but he tried to convince her so much that they're not really their kids, they're not real, that for him, the biggest sin he can make is make the same mistake, and think that the dream world kids are his kids and not the real world. Like, that was the biggest possible sin. Therefore, he trained himself all those years to disregard them whenever they popped up in his psyche. That way, when it's the real thing, he will know, because he will no longer have that muscle nerve reaction to avoid seeing them. Like if he's gonna like let go and finally see them, it's because it's true. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't argue the theory that he's in the real dream world and he's stuck and he can't get out, and the only compromise is to just see their faces finally and have his life, because that's what he can muster if you're stuck deep in limbo or whatever it was that he got lost in.
Yeah.
But I think what the movie says is that family matters, reality matters. Like, what's the most important thing? The parents, and this is part of the issue of the movie as far as substance, they don't really set up the relationship with the kids in any significant way. There's no flashbacks or anything. So there's no strong connection there.
It's pretty much all flashbacks.
Yeah, but there's no, there's no conversations he has with them showing how much he loves them,
Yeah.
things like that. But I can accept that. But generally, I think what the movie is about, if he is in the real world and he goes back, is there's nothing like the real world. Like there's nothing that ultimately, whatever fantasy you live through, and in a way you said like this is a movie about movies. In a way, it's like whatever movie or adventure you go on, it's never, no matter how fun, how exciting, how perfect it is, like he had with his wife for 50 years, no matter how good it is, it's not the real world. That ultimately the end goal is to get to the real world and be with people that you love for real, not as projections of your own psyche, but as their own individuals that are independent and chaotic. They won't be what you want them to be. They will be what they will be, and that's important, especially in a movie that's all about the dream world and the whole, the blurring the lines between dream and reality. That's what the movie is about. That it could be addicting. Like there's all these people, the scene with the people in what was like India or somewhere, where they like to spend more time in the dream world than in the real world. It's ultimately that this guy is an addict. Like he was stuck in there for many, many years. He lived a whole lifetime in there. But what he learned in the process is that there's nothing like reality, as imperfect as it is,
Well,
and it's worth fighting for.
yeah, I hear you, but at the same time, my interpretation is that eventually he just gave into the addiction. That he just decided, you know what, fuck it, I'm happy here. I'm happy in the dream.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can go round and round, and we will just have different perspectives. And I think it's completely valid depending on the perspective you bring. And again,
But what philosophically, just philosophically, what argument do you think that the movie would be making if the ending were just, well, everything worked out for Cobb?
Like what
You
Gil
know,
was saying, it would just simply be about that there's nothing like the real world, which of course, is probably one of the reasons why Gil was saying earlier that he feels that the movie doesn't have nearly as much substance as its reputation would lead you to believe.
well, that's fair. I I fail to see the thrust of what would have been said if, it's just like, well, everything just turned out great for Cobb, and hey, this Japanese guy called in some favors, and now you can go home. And, also, like, the movie doesn't really give us a lot of context clues for that. The kids, I've been around kids around that age, it doesn't look like the kid's aged at all.
Yeah, I've
If
heard
he,
people bring that up before too.
right, if he's been gone for a year or two, those kids are not looking like the kids that he left.
But again, someone could
Uh,
easily just make the argument that that's all misdirection. Not just the fact that they didn't age much, but also just the fact that the one shot you see them finally turning towards him in looks like the exact same shot that he only saw them from their back of their heads
yeah,
before, but now they turned, kind of thing. All of that. I mean, but like Gil said, we could keep going around and around in circles with this, but I mean, more than likely it was intended to get people to start talking about it.
yeah,
Yeah, ultimately, I think that was what the trick was in the end, is that you can basically go both ways on the ending. I think that was what was intended with the top wobbling and everything, which is good. That's a good ending for a movie. It's good to have ambiguity. It's just that in my book, it's an inconsistent, shitty movie if he ends up in the dream world. But I understand that it's just a cynical way of looking at it, because an addict is always an addict, a criminal is always a criminal, and eventually he didn't fall trapped to like his own psyche, but in the face of being stuck in limbo, he unfortunately had to make that choice. It's just a very deflated ending to me.
Well, I
But
think we can all agree that there's been better movies with better ambiguous endings for sure.
yeah.
yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think of some. I think I was trying to think.
I thought of one, but it's like such a weird like indie film that it doesn't even make sense to bring it up.
Well, go for it. Give it a try.
Oh, there's a movie called Safety Not Guaranteed, and I absolutely love
Oh
the
yeah.
ending of that one.
I mean, in a lot of ways, No Country for Old Men had a little bit of a. It had like three ambiguous endings, uh, and it still worked. But to me, No Country, was kind of built around this premise of, yeah, the world is chaotic, and this is all just shit that happens.
Right.
It wasn't really building around a message other than, yeah, we're
So
living in a
you're saying
chaotic
that
world.
one's an example where the message is very clear. It's just that there's just story elements that could be called ambiguous.
Yeah, I mean, with Inception, it's just one of those things where, okay, is he in a dream or is he not in a dream? At the end of the movie, it's bifurcated, right? And I stand by the perspective that he was in a dream at the end of the movie. And I stand by that because I think that the evidence stacks up mostly, except for the little wobble to support that.
Well,
But
and the ring.
also, yeah, but also because the movie just makes more sense and has a better message if he's still in a dream.
Hmm.
If he's not in a dream, then it's just a movie about somebody who did a lot of immoral stuff and had it all work out for him.
It's not that immoral. It's not any worse than like Ocean's 11.
Still, but
I mean, it's a movie where there's like tons of violence and not a single real person got killed.
uh, actually, that's a fair point. Uh, but uh, I mean, breaking down a multinational corporation is definitely going to leave a lot of people unemployed and desperate and all that.
Yeah. Well, that just goes back to the whole
horrifying.
how much do we as the audience accept their one line of dialogue that justifies what they're doing?
Yeah, and I don't, but you know, but but I mean, you know, it's still a cool movie. I mean, that hallway sequence is one of the greatest action sequences that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that they actually built a centrifuge with that hallway and actually filmed that practically is just amazing. And everybody should see the movie just for that. I, I I don't care about the philosophy. I don't care about the the production design. I don't care about anything. Just like that one sequence, everybody watch the fucking movie just for that. It is just one of the greatest things that's ever been put to film.
I mean, I was thinking like the one movie that the obvious comparison, like it's very different, but 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of my favorite endings because it's like Inception in the way that it's whatever you bring to it. Like the fact that they chose to never show the aliens, the fact that everything is so mysterious, all those decisions created an ending where if you're religious, then it's God. If you're an atheist, then it's aliens. If you're agnostic, then you don't know what it is. It's just all one big mystery, and that's probably what should most people take out of the movie is that really we just don't know. We just know that there's some sort of power in the universe that might potentially could have influenced human life. We don't know when, we don't know how, and we might not never find out. And that's the beauty of our reality. And then whatever like future might hold as far as evolutionary potential and all that, like could we be star creatures or more than just carbon entities, and join with the stars, like all those things, like it's just all ideas, but it's all very vague ideas, and really it's all about whatever epistemology or culture or just that you bring to it is what you get out of it.
Yeah. I mean, the difference for me is that with 2001, regardless of the interpretation, you still get meaning, right?
Yeah, but I think we've established that there's meaning in both ways that Inception
I
ends.
personally see meaning in both. I just think that Nolan wanted us to be arguing about it and left it ambiguous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking at an article where
I like that Gil's interpretation is right because it leaves me with a nice warm feeling of like, yay, I like it. I especially like the part where you said that the reason he walks away from the top is because he no longer needs the top once he sees his kids. That made me go like, oh, that's how I should have thought about it because that's happy. And not to dilute it or anything or to downplay the significance of that. That's just what my initial thought was when you said that. I also kind of think that there's a lot to what Matt is saying as well. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's ambiguous enough that you could really take either side. Really, it doesn't necessarily take away from the movie.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I'm like, I'm reading like one article, and it's funny, we kind of like went long on this, but this is what it's all about, It's whatever movie we talk about, we'll go where we go. But I'm reading like an article where they kind of discussed this with Nolan, and he was very cryptic about it. But
Of course he was, because he's screwing with everybody.
Yeah, but a few things that he says. The kids are not wearing the same clothes at the end, and they do age. We were working with two sets of kids. And then, like, I think the interviewer says, like, Saito honors his agreement. They build Limbo to be their reality together. And then Nolan says, oh, that's not how I would have read the movie. And then there's another comment. He says near the end, the interviewer says, the top doesn't matter. Cobb can finally see his children's faces. And then Nolan says, the important thing is that Cobb's not looking at the top. He doesn't care because he sees the children's faces, because the top no longer matters, because that's all the proof that he needs. That was my interpretation. And then at the end, the guy says the audience has to take a leap of faith. Nolan uses ambiguity as a storytelling tool. There's just there isn't just one answer. And then Nolan said, "Oh no, I've got an answer." Like he has his own interpretation of the movie.
Of course he does.
He just chose to keep it ambiguous. And the way I see it, based on the consistency of the character, based on the faces, and they do mention the wedding ring thing, that's like a trifecta. Like he is in the fact that they cast like different age kids with different clothes apparently. If all those things are correct, everything that falls in line with the fact that he's in the real world. But maybe he did keep it ambiguous because it's kind of cool that, you know, if you bring cynicism into it, then that addicts are always
I don't
addicts.
think there's any question that he did it on purpose. I mean,
Yeah.
if he wanted to make a statement that it was that way and no, you know, my way or the highway, he would have, number one, showed the top toppling, and number two, he would have not taken all those little steps that we just talked about like 10 minutes ago to like kind of give you this feeling like this is too perfect.
Yeah, the misdirection for sure. The misdirections are kind of obvious, because if it was like a perfect exit from the dream world, then obviously he's in the real world. But because he just all of a sudden wakes up, then it's ambiguous. How did he get out of there?
I do want to say, for anybody who ends up listening to this, like, I'm unapologetically cynical. So yes, I
Oh no, and by the way, I'm not trying to make you seem like you're cynical. I'm just saying specifically your reading of the movie is that the ending should be cynical. It's not that
and again, I'm not attacking you at all for that. I mean, like, I am generally a cynical person. I look at art from a cynical point of view, and I think that Inception is a better movie when you look at it cynically. But you know, that's all I have to say. I mean, but that's also one of the great things about Inception, is that we need to have that conversation. The fact that we are clashing about it, the fact that you are a smart person and I'm, you know, kind of, sort of, maybe a smart person, and Jason's a smart person.
I think you should flip that, actually. I'm the kind of maybe, and you're the smart person.
Let me ask you a question real quick. Do you see Matt as a cynical person?
No, I can see as a movie fan, like, coming into the movies, like liking the, you know, the Shakespeare tragedies and all these movies that delve deep into the human condition by telling tragic stories, or, you know, stories about addicts that are doomed to be addicts and criminals that will always be criminals, or we all like a redemption story as well, but those stories, there is this thing about, like, that at the core we are who we are, which, funny enough, with Cobb, it does feel to me like at his core all he was trying to do the entire time is keep his head above water or above the dream world, like not being sucked in and getting out of there, just like he did with his wife and just like he should for the sake of his real kids in the real world. But from that perspective, it's like, nah, ultimately he's a bit of an addict. Like, he kept going down there to see her, and in the end he eventually chose not her, like the kids, just in the dream world, not the real world. And that's okay. I think it's a fine perspective to bring to it, and maybe that's, like we said, what Nolan was going for with the ambiguity. But generally, I don't know if I can assess completely, like, on the spectrum of, like, if Matt is like a cynic or a
I was mostly
pessimist.
joking.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know I'm just trying to analyze Matt now, but I think I personally, I feel like I'm a realist, or at least, I don't feel like I'm really an optimist or a pessimist. I would say I'm more of an optimist than a pessimist, but I think somewhere in the middle, like, I'm a realist, and I think maybe Matt is as well. I don't know where you put yourself, Jason.
Well, I mean, I like to think that, well, okay, fundamentally, I would say that I hope for the best and always plan for the worst. But
Yeah, exactly the way I am. So
yeah,
to
Oh, I have
wrap it
some
up.
questions.
um,
I want to know what you guys thought about some of these things. Aside from just the big casting issue that we brought up earlier, this time through, I noticed a few things that like really bugged me. And maybe you guys saw stuff that I didn't. Maybe there is explanations for this that I just don't know about. I don't know. But I feel like in the third dream level, when they're in the snow, the James Bond level,
yeah,
they set up how there's this like impenetrable fortress, and they have this plan, and they got to climb down the mountain. They got to do all this stuff, and then there's this whole moment where Cobb is talking to the girl, and he says like, "Hey, like, we don't have time. We got to get in there quick. You got to. There's got to be a shortcut into this fortress. So she has to resort to that. Everything about the scene says that this is like an impenetrable fortress, and they have to break into it, right, to get Fisher to the safe, the vault,
yeah,
or whatever, right? So they go. They then, as soon as that happens, they then go on this crazy, like, elaborate thing about how they broke in through the vents. And they did all this stuff, and they got Saito and Fisher inside, and then they both get shot or something, right? And they're down, right? And it's like, oh no, we didn't get him to the vault in time. Oh no. And I get that the story now requires for them to go one more step down. That's where they want the story to go. But if you look at when you're watching this movie, as soon as they shoot Fisher and then Leonardo DiCaprio he shoots Marion
no,
Cotillard, and there's nobody in the room. I get that there's nobody in that direct room, but like moments later, all three of the other teammates just waltz right in. There's no more guards. There's no more nothing. Like nothing stops them at that point. They just like there's all this struggle to get the two people in, and in order to do that, they had to set up a sniper post to start shooting people. They had to do all these other things, and then all of a sudden, it's like, all right, now it's cool. Let's just walk right in. Like, did I miss something, or is that just like a huge flaw in that scene?
Yeah, it
I
does feel like there's some similarities between Tenet and Inception on like just the action sequences are a bit all over the place and somehow they get to where they need to go.
No.
yeah,
And then as far as like the rules of their thing, I don't understand why is Saito in the same limbo as them. He dies in the James Bond level, like, and he's like dead, and he doesn't even go into the same dream that they're in the last stage when they go to the beach and they have to rescue Fisher or whatever, and like
limbo.
limbo, whatever you want to call that one. Like he's not even in there with them on that one. So why is Leonardo DiCaprio sticking around longer to help get him out? Wouldn't they be in two separate limbos or something? They're not even in the same dream.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I mean, they do
Um,
say early on when he gets shot,
and
they're like, what's going to happen to him? And they're like, he'll live out the rest of his days in limbo. And it's like, okay, but wouldn't he be in his own limbo separate from them? Because he didn't even go into the same dream as them.
yeah, that is a major
I mean,
problem
unless, of
that
course,
I
they are
still
all
can't
the same dream in
reconcile
the
with.
very first stage. So maybe that's what it's supposed to be. That seems like something they would have to explain.
Yeah,
I don't know, I'm a bit confused. I did notice something about that, like when the whole thing when he gets shot in the one level and then it travels to the next level. It did feel a bit weird, like I didn't detect anything hugely problematic. I mean, aren't they all in the aren't they all in the psyche of like I guess maybe not the depending on the level. They start off in like the sun's head,
They all
right?
start off in one at one point. They're in The very first level, they're
Cillian
in.
Murphy's.
No.
No?
What's the? I can't remember his name now.
Oh,
He's the
technically it's DiCaprio's like head. No.
no. In the very first level, they're in Dalip Rao. Yusuf is his character's name. They're in his thing because he's drinking too much wine or too much champagne, and when they get in, it's raining, and they start joking about it with him. They're like,
Oh, right.
you
Yeah,
drinking?
yeah.
And then the next one down, they're in
Arthur's.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt's dream. That's why he's the one who stayed behind in that one. And then the third time down, they go into they trick Cillian Murphy and say we're going into your Tom Berenger's dream, but they really knock him out and go into his dream.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Got it. So you're saying that. Oh, so you're saying once he dies, Saito, like in one level, he would just drop to the next level?
I don't know. I mean, that's the
Well,
part that I feel they don't explain very well. Like he's literally like dead on the ground in the snow level, in the third level down.
Oh, he's not dead, but he's
Well, they
dying.
say, I don't know. They mention.
they say that in each level down, his wound would be less severe.
Right. Well,
Uh,
and they also said something like, if you die in there, you go to limbo or something.
yes.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. I just find it weird that the last level down, it's just Leonardo DiCaprio and Elliot Page, going into, who are they going? I guess they're going into. See, that's the other part I didn't get. So that leads me right to my next problem. So I just watched this thing. It's fresh in my mind. I do not understand why they even needed to go into the last step. So like, what's his name? Cillian Murphy gets shot.
Sorry, Fisher.
Yeah, Fisher. Cillian Murphy's character gets shot, and they all stand around his body going, "Oh, we failed." And then all of a sudden, Ellen Page has a plan. She's like, "No, we can still pull this off if we go one deeper." It's like, so far, there's no explanation why that wakes him up. They say to Tom Hardy, use the defibrillator on him the moment we need the kick. So it's almost like they just revived him and he finished the mission in that third level. Why do they even need to go into another dream? It doesn't make any sense. Couldn't they just have defibrillated him, have him wake up, and then he like finishes the mission, and they don't even have to go into that dangerous last step with Marion Cotillard?
Yeah, it's the whole thing is strange, but I'm sure, much like Tenet, that motherfucker has an explanation.
I'm sure.
You know,
I'm sure.
Nolan like has something where he rationalized like why that made sense, or at least because I guess he goes to speak to his wife, right? Like Cobb,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
and that's
in terms of the story, I get it. You definitely want to face the thing that Leonardo DiCaprio has been struggling with in this whole movie, which is sitting down face to face with the wife character. You need that at the end of the movie. I just don't think it's justified. I'm like, wait, so why?
yeah, it's that's just a plot point for the sake of being a plot point, or is it actually pertinent to the heist?
I just want to know what their justification was for why that was necessary. After watching this, I decided to watch both, to get the cultural relevance of Inception. I decided to watch both the South Park episode of Inception as well as the Rick and Morty episode Lawnmower Dog.
Yeah.
Oh, you did a lot of research.
It was fresh on my mind. I was watching on HBO Max. Both of those are right there on my list. So
Good.
I think that
seen
Rick and Morty made a funnier episode, because I think Inception, the funniest thing in it is just seeing that guy whenever they're explaining the deep, like heady Inception sci-fi stuff. One of the guys in the background is just kind of going do 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 do.
Oh, with Matt too.
Of all the music,
Yeah,
overly dramatic music.
I will say I did enjoy the soundtrack more this time. I felt like that soundtrack the whole time theme is very like repetitive, but I don't know. This time around, when I saw the ending and he saw his kids and everything, and it lined up for me, I was like, this kind of works. it soars, it kind of rises like just at the right time, and kind of works. So I still prefer the Dark Knight score, but and also I think he had a pretty good score in Interstellar, but this was not bad.